Welcome to Last Week in AWS. I'm Corey Quinn. What did AWS do last week? Well, some monstrosities. Buckle up, we're about to find out. Amazon DynamoDB now supports auto-approval of quota adjustments. This turns the quota into less of something you need to talk to AWS about so they can review your use case, and more of a check to ensure that you don't inadvertently do something on sound that you can move yourself. I like it. Amazon Elastic Block Store, or EBS as the kids call it, now adds full snapshot size information in console and API. To which I say, finally! This is huge for those of us who are trying to figure out why that component of EC2 Other is so freaking high. This episode is sponsored in part by my day job, the Duckbill Group. Do you have a horrifying AWS bill? That can mean a lot of things. Predicting what it's going to be, determining what it should be, negotiating your next long-term contract with AWS, or just figuring out why it increasingly resembles a phone number, but nobody seems to quite know why that is. To learn more, visit duckbillgroup.com. Remember, you can't duck the duckbill bill. And my CEO informs me that is absolutely not our slogan. Amazon RDS for MySqueal announces extended support minor 5.74.RDS-20250103. Look forward to RDS prices skyrocketing soon in a prod environment near you. Amazon Redshift Serverless announces reduction in IP address requirements to 3 per subnet. Previously, this thing required to run a cluster 27 IP addresses at a minimum, which is funny. That's the same number of clowns that were in the car that showed up to the architecture review meeting to tell folks that this was anything other than an absurdity. There's something deeply concerning about this service. AWS Deadline Cloud now supports Adobe After Effects in service-managed fleets. This was leaked a day early in, of all places, the AWS service terms. Yes, I watch that like a hawk. I'm pretty close to being aware of an AWS product owner whispering about a new feature in the dark at this point. AWS Network Load Balancer now supports removing availability zones. That's right, adding an AZ to your network load balancer is no longer a one-way door. AWS CloudTrail network activity events for VPC endpoints now generally available. That's 10 cents per 100,000 events delivered. Is that a good price? How many events will be delivered? Your guess is as good as mine, but we're going to find out. Harness Amazon Bedrock agents to manage SAP instances. Because if there's one place where customers absolutely want an overconfident AI agent to around and find out, it's the ERP system. Timestamp writes for write hedging in Amazon DynamoDB. Now, implementing something like this would be a real feather in an engineer's cap theorem. Updating AWS SDK defaults, AWS STS service endpoint, and retry strategy. So 2 points here. 1, this is slated to go out July 31st. So mark your calendars now. That way you know what to look at when something that's been behaving suddenly goes completely haywire. And 2, does anyone want to bet how many times this change is going to be delayed at the last minute? This episode is sponsored by my own company, the Duckbill Group. Having trouble with your AWS bill? Perhaps it's time to renegotiate a contract with them. Maybe you're just wondering how to predict what's going on in the wide world of AWS. Well, that's where the Duckbill Group comes in to help. Remember, you can't duck the Duckbill bill, which I am reliably informed by my business partner is absolutely not our motto. Learning AWS best practices from Amazon Q in the console. Don't use the AWS console was basically a best practice from the Church of Infrastructure as Code for a while now, but it turns out they couldn't shove AI into a CloudFormation template, so there you go. Automating cost optimization governance with AWS config. The trouble here is that nobody actually does this. AWS config comes along for the ride with Control Tower or Guard Duty or Security Hub or whatnot, and it costs money every time a resource changes somehow. And as a result, this becomes an expensive proxy metric for how cloudy an environment is. If you have a bunch of instances sitting around like VMs that never scale up or down, super low config bill. If you have a highly dynamic environment that spins things up and down all the time, you have a vastly more cost-effective architecture, and config wants a piece of the money that you're saving. Be careful, it bites. And finally, though it brings me no pleasure, I've linked to the documentation, Amazon Q Developer and Chat Applications Rename, Summary of Changes for AWS Chatbot. So, AWS Chatbot is being renamed to Amazon Q Developer because someone's willing to throw customer obsession onto the pyre of their own promo packet. Sounds like Google, doesn't it? You're going to have a potentially workflow-breaking change inflicted upon you at a time of AWS's choosing so they can make something that's easily understood in the sense of, oh, it's a chatbot, into something vast and confusing. They claim nothing is changing but the name today, but I know the thin end of a wedge when I see it. This is a disappointment. And that's what happened last week in AWS. I'm cloud economist Corey Quinn. Stick around.